Hi,
Okay.
I'm Ezelle from the upcoming Lovely to Meet You, Nathan. It's a real pleasure.
Lovely to
Congratulations
meet you
on this
too.
fantastic documentary. If you could start by giving us a brief introduction to this documentary, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and what viewers can expect from it.
The Subtle Art is it's based on the best-selling book, self-help book by Mark Manson. It's about suffering. It's about heartache and loss and disappointment and how these things can kind of sneak up on us, and uh we weave kind of, I think, a natural protective instinct sort of wrap around those things and sometimes can harden us and um, make us sort of stir up dark energies inside us. Um, and that sounds all very heavy, but it's actually a really fun, crazy ride. It's because we're thinking about how that happens in the culture and how that, and it's really about just being a human being and how hard it is to be a human being, but that's okay, and then we're going to get through it, and it's going to be awesome. And yeah, I think that's the main thing. I mean, the main thing, I guess, is it's that, but it's fun, and it's sort of bombastic and nuts and surreal and that kind of thing.
And uplifting. I
Uplifting,
think
yeah,
obviously
that's where it gets to. But we don't want to give away the ending. Uh,
I think obviously, given that his book was such a and is a huge global success, he's obviously been approached many times, for film series
yeah,
and visual options since release, I think 5 years ago, roughly. So
yeah.
how did you convince him that your collaboration with the producer, Mark Metcalf, was kind of the winning formula to bring this book to screen?
Well, I wasn't actually on board then, but Matthew has told me the story. I mean, he basically, I think a lot of people had approached. I mean, Ryan Reynolds had approached him. And CA we just thought he wasn't going to go with anybody. And then Matthew reached out, and Matthew had done some great documentaries, the Capital in the 21st Century, and I think Mark just saw there that there was some definite. Hold on a second. Uh, it was the sort of thing that he wanted to make. It was serious, but it was fun, and it was sort of, it wasn't, because people had pitched him reality TV shows and kind of these, and the other thing is, self help's notoriously difficult to adapt. So I think the idea was we just had that vision there for telling a story that had a human arc through it. That there was a way to sort of solve the problem of how to put self help to screen in a way that wasn't, often it's a concert film or a sort of town hall style kind of thing, which people get up and it's a little bit kind of, I don't want to diss that. That's great. But it's a different style, and this was really a film. It's a film in that kind of Adam Curtis-y, kind of Errol Morris-y style of really taking an interview and then expanding and blowing that up and sort of feeling how that affects the world. I don't know. There's a pitch. I wasn't their exact pitch, but he obviously bought onto it, and that was good. So that was good.
Well, and not only did he bring on, he actually put himself in the starring role of this as well. How did that happen
Yeah.
in terms of putting him in front of the camera, taking out of his comfort zone, and then obviously having him available on location for filming in New Zealand during COVID, I believe.
Yeah, well, that was tricky. I mean, yeah, he's an author, so that's not his natural. He's happiest at a keyboard, typing out those sweet, sweet sentences. But he had done a lot of kind of interviews after the book, the success of the book, and a lot of podcasts and stuff. And he said to me that, his it was great training for what we were doing. But what we did these 4 days of 4 hour interviews, these massive interviews. It got to a point at one point where, and as the interviewer, you are kind of, to help someone be the most magnanimous and kind of open person, you have to be this kind of receiving vessel. And it got to the point, at some point, like 2 or 3 hours into one of the interviews, where his face actually started floating off the background and hovering in front of my head. Just because of that kind of the concentration we of being in that space together. But I thought he was great, and I think I could see just how mentally taxing it is. I mean, these are really complex ideas, and he's trying to say them in a way that connects and that's what he sort of honed through his writing over the years. He started out as a blogger, and the blog sort of became the book, and he's found this way to communicate with people. And he'll tell you this himself. None of this stuff is really new. It's, it's the Stoics, it's Buddhism, it's Zen Buddhism, it's the existentialists, it's, but he's found a way to kind of communicate that audience in a really kind of like, just like your mate would tell you in a bar, that connects. And so we just really went with that, and him to be able to do all that kind of mental work of finding these sort of complex spiritual concepts and then sort of making them in a really kind of approachable way. It's taxing, but I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, he did. As you can see from watching it, I mean, it's great, and I think that you can see this real blend of kind of animation, archive footage, the real visuals, including the unlikely hero, disappointment panda.
Yeah.
And they surround Mark talking directly to the camera about his experiences. Can you talk us through that kind of filming process and those choices?
Well, it was part of it was efficiency. Part of it was the time we were living in COVID times. So I shot the whole thing in 8 days. So it was, we knew we had to have this sort of big central interview, and we filmed that in a style that multiple cameras, and so that we can kind of be constantly sort of adjusting your emotional relationship to him as he goes through the different material. And then it was like, well, how do you? My question was, who is the main character in a self-help book? And it's a really kind of, and I was like, I don't know, who is it? Him? Is it he's telling the story? I said, not really, because he's just the kind of guy. And the main character in a self-help book is you. You're the person who's like, oh, maybe that's me. And what is that you? How does that you kind of manifest itself? And so that we did that in a couple of ways. It's almost like a monomyth. It's like, because this is very kind of common to I think to most people's human experience, that we experience suffering and we struggle with it, and sometimes it can turn us into assholes, and sometimes we have to deal with our own assholishness. So he is one of the main characters, the younger version of himself, and I wouldn't, we're all still struggling with ourselves. Even the Dalai Lama meditates 4 hours a day so he can be as charming as he is. So I don't think as humans we're ever really complete. So we had to find this character that could kind of go from this journey of having this tragedy, something disappointing happen. He gets busted. He kind of has all these problems, and then we sort of brought in other characters, almost, and a lot of digital artwork, and then characters from the internet, and then anecdotes, and we kind of weave those all together. So you kind of have this feeling of a sort of a common character. Because this is a kind of a monomythic story that we experience suffering. It's Job. It's getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. It's the Iliad in a way. The Iliad, Achilles. He has a sulk at the start, and then his friend get killed, and then he goes nuts and starts murdering everybody. Nobody gets murdered in this, but it does get to a point where sometimes your problems can turn into a very bad argument, or whatever murdering everybody is in as a level in your life. And so we've tried to create this character through digital art, through his story, and then through anecdotal stories, and that kind of informed all sort of this weave of humanity. So it kind of has this kind of I don't know what you'd call it. It's like a video essay partly, and I think it's informed by that kind of almost YouTube video essay kind of thing that's become really interesting genre at the moment. But so that necessitated the animation and the use of stock, and particularly use of stock and stuff that we did. And it's also a collaboration between a lot of different filmmakers, because I only had a limited time to shoot it. Disappointment Panda, when he was mentioned in the book, I instantly thought of that commercial that Ali had made, and I used as a reference when we were talking about it. And then I could just see, for me to craft that up in the time I had, I just didn't have the time. I make commercials also as part of my bread and butter, and I just knew I didn't have the resource to do that. So we reached out to Ali, and he was kind enough to let us use his work there, and it just made that piece. And then there's another what would you call it? A sort of string that goes through it of this guy with a gold hood, And we found that on one of the digital sort of stock sites, but it was somebody's short film. And so we reached out to Cameron Gade, and he kindly let us use his rushes to kind of weave this character through. So, it was, and this was partly because it is, COVID times and we couldn't do things we would usually do. But it was really great just to, and there's hundreds of other filmmakers who have contributed in various ways. And they may not even know they've contributed. But it's a real collaboration in that sense.
And I think alongside that, yes, you did amazingly. I think, also you've got kind of a balance, haven't you, of loss, self-destruction, and then kind of comedy. And for those that maybe haven't read the book and have come straight to this documentary, what do you think some of those messages, and what do you want people to feel by having that kind of comedy and a serious element in it? What do you want them to take away from this?
Well, that was always the thing. I think it's hard dealing with our own egos and dealing with our own foibles. We like to think that we're these great people, but sometimes we're not. And we have to admit that that's a really human experience. And that's why I just kind of constantly weave the serious message back to the comic, and just to kind of create space that our egos don't get too kind of like defensive, and also using awe. We use scale a lot at the end of the film and throughout, just so you can step back from your own existence and from his stories and stuff and go, is that me? And it's really, I mean, the message is, it's hard being a human being, and that's okay. And you'll be okay if you can just allow that to be, allow the hardness to be part of what is living, and just find a way to orient yourself towards that's okay. And people have, terrible experiences. And often when people buy Mark's book, something bad's happened, a divorce, a breakup, some disappointment in their life, or they feel stuck. So it's about hope in the end, and about kind of your own amazingness and ability to overcome these things. That's the message, I guess.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for talking to me. It was lovely to meet you. And congratulations. Thank you so much. Bye, Nathan. Bye.